P4 show from the P4 control.
There is a high possibility of 9/11-like terrorist attacks on the US, but this time, the attackers might not be outsiders, but rather common Americans, those born in the US, who work in the US, whose families are American, and who might also serve in the US military. The January 2, 2025, attack by a 42-year-old Texas man, Shamsuddin Jabbar, is the first alarming sign of bigger conspiracies taking place against the US, and there are high chances that, if US agencies do not take it seriously, the world will witness more attacks like this. Now, this person, Shamsuddin Jabbar, is not a teenager or mental patient, but rather a US Army veteran, who served in the US military for 8 years and was even deployed to Afghanistan. Now, the question arises, how did he get so radicalized that he intentionally rammed his truck over innocent people, who were celebrating New Year's Eve on Bourbon Street in the heart of New Orleans, Louisiana? Shamsud, wearing a ballistic vest and helmet, was trying to run over as many people as he possibly could, carrying an ISIS flag under his rented Ford F-150 Lightning vehicle. He was also armed and fired on law enforcement, injuring 2 officers before being killed by police counteraction. Now the attacker is eliminated, but it leaves everyone with some complex questions about why he did that. Could the answer be easy access to the internet or social media, corrupt policing, or political alliances? The answer could be anything, or maybe everything. But it is very deep to think about how a person who served in the US Army takes the lives of their own people. Now things are already done, which cannot be reversed. 14 people died and at least 35 more were injured, which takes us to another question. Is the US safe now, or is the planning of more such attacks in the work? If yes, then what are the factors suddenly driving these attacks? Now, first, the obvious one is US unconditional support for Israel, which is triggering insane radical thoughts and feelings among peaceful communities to take revenge against the US and Israel both. Now, Israel is carpet bombing whole peaceful communities. There are other communities as well, but the majority is peaceful faith organizations and followers, which have a history of spreading peace among different nations to counter peace phobia. The second reason is Donald Trump, the new US president, who is extremely peace-phobic and does not want peace to spread in his country. Trump has openly stated many times regarding the mentality of these peacekeepers, and how he could go to any length to keep those peacekeepers far away from the US. And recently, as you might know, Trump also passed an executive order to deport international students and scholars involved in pro-Palestinian protests, citing concerns over rising anti-Semitism. And in that, a man named Mahmoud Khalil was also arrested, which caused a lot of controversy. The third reason is extreme woke culture in the US. Now, we all should respect LGBTQ+ citizens, but nowadays, these communities are not respecting male or female gendered people. They just want every newborn to act like them, dress like them, march like them, which is totally senseless. That community is not respecting the nation, which protects all their members, but rather burning that country's flag, disrespecting culture, damaging the country's image, and also standing against the country. That community's members are showing extreme sympathy toward peacekeepers, thinking peacekeepers also love those members, which may be true, but for that, those community members should visit peacekeeper countries and give an introduction. Now, woke mindset people are the most vulnerable to being radicalized, so US agencies need to pay special attention to them. Similarly, there are multiple reasons that may eventually lead to small or big terrorist attacks on the US. Radicalization is never a single, isolated event. It is a process, a gradual journey that can occur over months or even years. Shamsuddin Jabbar's radicalization likely did not occur overnight but was the result of a complex series of influences. It often begins in online spaces, where extreme viewpoints are shared and reinforced. The ability to access, consume, and engage with such content has grown exponentially in the last decade. For someone like Jabbar, who had a military background and may have been exposed to trauma or disillusionment following his service, the internet can provide a sense of belonging in online communities that support violent ideologies. Platforms like Telegram, Twitter, and even anonymous forums have become breeding grounds for extremist recruitment, particularly for those seeking to justify or rationalize their anger, frustration, or alienation. The allure of groups like ISIS or other far-right extremist organizations is magnified by the ease with which individuals can become indoctrinated online. online. Through echo chambers, where users interact with like-minded individuals who reinforce their beliefs, radical ideologies can be amplified. In Jabbar's case, the ISIS flag he carried during the attack may not just represent a symbol of political violence but also of an ideology he had absorbed, likely through his exposure to extremist content online. The anonymity of the internet can also foster a detachment from reality, where online rhetoric about jihad, civil war, or revenge might seem more enticing and less consequential than real-life actions. Another critical factor in radicalization is the current political climate, which has become increasingly polarized in the U.S. Over the past few years, the U.S. has seen a dramatic rise in ideological divides, particularly between liberal and conservative factions. This polarization is not just about political party lines, it often extends into culture wars, identity politics, and deep mistrust of government institutions. Shamsuddin Jabbar's military service is another significant factor in understanding his potential radicalization. Though he was not deployed for direct combat operations in Afghanistan, he would still have been exposed to the challenges and stresses that come with serving in a conflict zone, including the moral and psychological toll of war. Even non-combat roles can place individuals in close contact with traumatic events, whether it's witnessing violence, interacting with local populations in tense environments, or dealing with the emotional strain of military life. War experiences can often lead to feelings of disillusionment, particularly when veterans return to civilian life and feel disconnected from the country they served. Veterans are sometimes left to grapple with unresolved trauma, mental health issues like PTSD, anxiety, and depression, while lacking sufficient support system. If a veteran like Jabbar struggled with these psychological issues and found little support from the military or his community, he could have been more susceptible to extremist ideologies that provide a sense of purpose, empowerment, or vengeance. Additionally, wartime experiences, including witnessing atrocities or experiencing the horrors of conflict, can fuel anger and bitterness. In some cases, these emotions can be manipulated by extremist groups, which offer a narrative that justifies violence in response to perceived grievances. The allure of groups like ISIS, which portray themselves as fighting a righteous war against Western powers, might have been appealing to Jabbar if he felt that his own sacrifices had been in vain or if he harbored unresolved resentment about his military service. Similarly to Shamsuddin's attack, another attack also occurred in the U.S. on January 1, 2025. A Tesla truck exploded in front of Trump Hotel in Los Angeles. This attack was also carried out by an American-born, active-duty U.S. soldier, Matthew Allen Livelsberger. The attack he carried out is even more profound to think about. He first set the time for the explosion and then committed suicide by shooting himself in the head, with the truck exploding at the designated time. Some rumors suggest that he planned this kind of attack using ChatGPT AI, which is a whole other topic. Now, this attack is not a terrorist attack but rather a politically derived attack. Matthew wanted to bring Americans' attention to the planning or workings of the U.S. government. Now you may ask, just for attention, he blasted a truck. So the answer is yes, and the reason is also strange. According to Matthew, Americans do not understand the situation or pay attention unless there is an explosion or blast in the country. According to him, the U.S. will collapse soon. He wrote 2 letters in which he described how the U.S. is heading for destruction. In the first letter, he told fellow military members, veterans, and Americans to wake up, because he believed the government was weak and only serving its own interest. He suggested that military members and veterans might need to remove members of the Democratic Party from the government and military, at first recommending peaceful ways, but then suggesting they might need to fight if necessary. In the second letter, Matthew denied that the bombing was a terrorist attack. He described it as a wake-up call, because he felt the United States was falling apart. He also mentioned he wanted to cleanse himself of the guilt from people he had lost and the lives he had taken. He criticized the growing gap between the rich and poor, especially the top 1% of earners, and he opposed efforts to promote diversity and inclusion. He expressed concerns about rival countries like Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran, and suggested the U.S. should focus on strength and masculinity. He also wanted the war in Ukraine to end with a negotiated settlement. He criticized Vice President Kamala Harris, calling her the DAI candidate, and expressed support for figures like Donald Trump, Elon Musk, and Robert F. Kennedy Jr., believing they could help restore U.S. power. Various other things were revealed in the letter, such as the U.S. government keeping its citizens under surveillance using weird drones, and others. So, this is it. Clearly, the circumstances that are developing in the US are very concerning and scary. Gun violence is already a big issue there, and every next week there is news of the killing of schoolchildren by a psycho person. Adding these kinds of attacks is even more disturbing. The US needs a complete policy shift along with a huge cultural shift because things are clearly going to be very disturbing in the future. Even Donald Trump's dream of a great USA may also fuel the fire. European nations, such as the UK, Germany, France, and most others, are also on high alert, as things could get messy there as well. There is a lot to see, but for the time being, thank you.